Okay, hi guys. So this week we're gonna investigate the uprisings, the Arab uprisings of 2010, 2011. So we are trying to shed light or to cast light on the main players and the processes and the outcome since like the outbreak of the uprisings and how different interactions with different between different players and perhaps like intervention of international and regional forces led to like different dynamics and divergent trajectories of the uprisings that led to different outcomes. So this lecture I'll try to cover Egypt, Tunisia, and Syria, and more on Syria next lecture because we're gonna have like three lectures, so I can cover like in some depth, the uprisings in the region, and then Libya and Yemen next lecture, and perhaps like the last lecture I'm gonna like give a summary or a kind of analysis about the different trajectories of the uprisings, and we're gonna like focus on Bahrain as well with the Saudi intervention and how like the intervention helped to put down the uprisings in Bahrain. Um, okay, so you have here like top right you have like Mohammed Bouazizi, the Tunisian young street vendor that did set himself on fire on 17th of December 2010. And actually it triggered, the incident, triggered massive protests and demonstrations, and triggered, the that actually and eventually led to the removal of Ben Ali. And Egyptians actually they supported, they were following the what was happening in Tunisia on social media, and they offered some sort of support through social media, and the events actually inspired Egyptians as well to organize, their events, and to go like to pressure, the regime even more intensively. So they started to draw parallel between the plight of Mohammed Bouazizi in Tunisia, and you hear like the photo of Khalid Said. He was like a blogger and brutally harassed by the police forces that led eventually to his death right before the eruption of the uprisings. Um, like it was like so they started, to draw parallel between like the two cases, and Egyptians actually they organized, their own. It started as like an event coordinated by different youth groups on Facebook in order in order to organize protests and demonstrations on the police day on 25th of January 2011, and like the process culminated into the ousting of Mubarak. And this, like, on top right, top left here, you have like the photo from Tahrir Square. It was like right after Omar Suleiman declared or announced the removal of Mubarak, and that he delegated, the power to the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. And one of the like spillover effect as well, happened in Syria when, like, some inspired kids in Dar'a, the called for the downfall of Bashar. And so you have here like kind of إجاك الدور يا دكتور, in a clear reference to Bashar al-Assad. That was like, the events in Egypt and in Tunisia first, and then Egypt. It actually sparked the flame, and Syrians, took to the streets in order to pressure or to ask for more political opening and more political reform. So that was like the initial scene that led to the outbreak of the uprisings, across different countries in the region, and of course, the Libya and Yemen as well. And but this lecture we're going to focus on these three cases. Like, so when it comes to, we're going to investigate in some detail, or to look into the processes that actually led eventually to these scenes. So, like, from the national plight of, or the plight of Bouazizi, that actually triggered massive demonstrations in Tunisia. And then we're going to investigate, the processes that actually brought Al Nahda, the Islamist, in a coalition with some non-Islamist parties to power, and eventually they had to hand over power to an old regime figure. Here on the top right, you hear, on your left hand side, this is Al Ghanouchi, like the leader of Nahda party, and then he shaked hand with the Sipsi, like old regime figure that actually like representative of Nida Tunis, that assumed power in October 2014. So like the uprisings in Tunisia, obviously led to smooth kind of transition of power. And in Egypt, from this mesmerizing scene in Tahrir Square in February 2011, it was another wave of demonstrations, but this time asked for the removal of the Brotherhood affiliated president, and they called upon the army to intervene, and they actually held the photo of Abdel Fattah Sisi, the commander in chief, back then, in asking him to intervene in order here, like Khalil Ikhwan Titlam, it's so please rein them in or box them in. So the asked, instead of asking for the toppling of the regime and the bread freedom and social justice in 2000 in January 2011, so they had totally different demands this time in June and July 2013. And then down here you have the photos of devastating, or the destructive civil war in Syria that led to severe human crisis in terms of massive influx of refugees that forced millions of Syrians into exile. And those who left in Syria, they were they left them in a bad need for humanitarian assistance and relief. So what we are trying to do this in this lecture is to investigate what kind of how the after the outbreak, we're not gonna investigate how the popular mobilizations actually came into being, or the dynamics of the collective action, but we're going to investigate what type of players they got involved in the uprising that led eventually to different different processes that in subsequently led to different outcomes. A smooth transition here in Tunisia, reinstallation or reinstatement of authoritarianism in Egypt, and with a new kind of discourse, not like revolutionary one, but a state-centered discourse, and then brutal and prolonged civil war in Syria. So we're trying to investigate the interaction between the players and their choices, and then how this led to eventually to different outcomes in the three countries. So starting with Egypt, okay, the organization of the event on Facebook. So they arranged to a day of rage on 25th of January, and then several groups actually they took to the streets on that day, and they managed to sustain protests for 18 days in order, and then they intensified their pressures on the regime that eventually led to the departure of the head of the regime, and and forced him to Mubarak actually to delegate power to SCAF, the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, and that formed, a caretaker government, and then it was in charge of like reshaping or the rules of the game and overhauling or re-engineering the existing institution that effectively actually didn't lead to radical transformation because of the inherited institutions actually remained intact, um, except for the Brotherhood affiliated president taking office. But the functionality of the state institution, or what's called the deep state, remained there, and the actually some state players took advantage of the divided and the polarized oppositions, especially between the Brotherhood and the Islamist and non-Islamist opposition. So by and large, the institutions and the how the state actually functions remained intact. Um, so there was kind of like the interest of the Brotherhood and the SCAF actually met at that point, because they share the same priorities at this point. So the SCAF actually aimed to restore stability and order through electoral dynamics, where giving some space for voting, and for creating representative institutions and elected bodies. This would enable the politicians or elite circles to get around some of the demands, instead of articulating these demands in the street. So people would articulate their grievances and demands through institutional channels and elected bodies. And the Brotherhood as well, knowing that, or believing in their organizational capacity and their pre-existing social networks and electoral constituencies. So they needed to make use of the situation and to capitalize on the political opportunity that they actually had at the time. And so they pushed for rapid restoration as well of stability and order through electoral dynamics and electoral processes, in order to get them into power centers and to pave the way for their penetration into state institutions. But actually the polarization between Islamist and non-Islamist, it actually had negative impact on the entire political process, because it reduced that to identity politics. So early signs came with the constitutional amendment and the popular referendum in March 2011. So the SCAF actually announced a list of articles that would subject to public referendum in order to say yes or no to these constitutional amendments. So they were actually centered on 9 articles that covered mainly the requirements of the eligibility criteria of the presidential candidates, and the authority of the parliament, and the term of the upper house, and the putting more and one article amendment focused on restricting the use of the emergency law, and abolishing and erasing the anti-terrorist provision that was used in order to violate the civil and the individual rights, and then to mandate one the creation of the Constituent Assembly to write a new constitution. So actually, the list of the amendments didn't include the Article 2 that focused on the Islamic Sharia and as like, you know, the source of legislation in Egypt. And then Islamists actually like grasp at this opportunity to drive the wedge and to turn it into, like, you know, identity battle or identity fight for identity or Sharia in order to protect, you know, Article 2 in the Constitution, while, you know, it was not, like, you know, it was not included in the list of the articles that subject to amendment. So the proponents and opponents of yes and no campaigns actually they got like dragged into this identity fight, and like Islamists, they sold it as, like, you know, saying yes to the constitutional amendment, meaning like protecting and shielding Article 2 of the Constitution, while like saying no for the part of non-Islamists, it means that they portrayed this as like military brotherhood amendments, and this would enable the brotherhood and the remnants of the Mubarak regime to take over power, and this to hijack, you know, the revolution, and to put an end to any potential for revolutionary and radical transformation of the state. So the brotherhood, although like repeatedly referred to or used, you know, the slogan of مشاركة لا مغالبة, it's like participation, not domination. So they used this slogan in order to alleviate, you know, fears of non-Islamist opposition, but they actually practically and realistically they did little, you know, to assuage, you know, these fears of non-Islamist opposition. So giving this, like, you know, the like a new like division of the political landscape. So many other actors, especially non-Islamist as well, so they reposition themselves, you know, in relation to Islamist, and they actually they were dragged into the same identity, the same fight for identity, and they asked for like a guardianship role of the military in order to impose super constitutional guarantee, in order to offer assurance and to safeguard, you know, the civil and the civil rights and equal citizenship for all. So this kind of tension between like and polarized situation between Islamist and non-Islamist dragged on, and it actually marked, or it was like the main characteristic, you know, that overshadowed, you know, the entire political dynamics during that period. What added to this, like the landslide victory of Islamists in the parliamentary elections, and then the Brotherhood president, you know, won the presidential race and the presidential elections and assumed power in June 2012. So for the parliamentary elections, the Brotherhood gained like roughly like 45% of the parliamentary seats, and the Salafis, you know, gained 25% of the parliamentary seats, and they both together they occupied, or they took control over 70% of the parliamentary seats. So it actually increased or added to the fears of non-Islamists of a potential Islamist takeover. But again, like, you know, the deep state, or the state apparatus, or the especially the military and the judicial power, they were there, and they kept actually trimming, you know, or eroding, you know, the rising power of Islamists, and they kept, you know, all, like, you know, the cards, you know, or the threads, you know, in their hands, kind of. Um, so here, like, the political landscape, the Islamist, the Brotherhood actually was not the only like Islamic group that struggled for power. So Salafis, they formed their own political party, and they actually stepped into the political landscape or the political arena as well, and they contested or competed for power. So they actually dragged or pushed the Muslim Brotherhood, farther to the right. Um, and like the deep state as well was like one of the the main players, and it actually it intervened several times in order to undermine the power bases of the Muslim Brotherhood or the Islamists. So the Supreme Constitutional Court, before the inauguration or the runoff, the second round election, the second round of the presidential elections in June 2012, it actually decided to dissolve the parliament, um, on the grounds that, okay, like it was like the electoral system, the it was based, it was like a mixed system, like two-thirds of the seats were elected through like this closed list proportional representation. So it was like basically for political parties, and then like the one-third of the seats were like the one-third was allocated for individuals to compete for, uh, and like the Freedom and Justice Party, the Brotherhood Party actually competed for, so individuals actually affiliated with the Brotherhood, with the Brotherhood Party, they were members in the party, they actually competed for some seats from the one-third that was allocated for independents and individuals to compete for. So the court actually, the court ruling was justified on the grounds that it actually violated the composition actually of the, especially of the one-third, violated the electoral law. And the Brotherhood like dominated, or the Islamists dominated parliament. They issued or they promulgated a law called political exclusion law, in order to isolate or to exclude Mubarak figure from any electoral contestation or any kind of political participation. So the courts actually blocked this law, and it was like ruled unconstitutional in June 2012, in order to clear the way for Ahmed Shafiq, one of the Mubarak's figure, in order to run for the presidency. And then the administrative court as well, it actually declared or announced the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly. So according to the constitutional amendment or the constitutional declaration by SCAF, it was not, it didn't state explicitly that the members of the Constituent Assembly had to come from the parliament. So by participation of some MPs, some parliamentary members, they participated in the Constituent Assembly. So that's why the court actually ruled the dissolution of the assembly. More importantly, so the SCAF actually, in order to secure its autonomous position in relation to, or to reshape this civil military relation, it was before the second round as well. So the SCAF actually declared additional or supplementary constitutional declaration in June 2012 in order to give itself a veto power to any constitutional clause would be made by the Constituent Assembly that would be in conflict with the, it's a very loose phrasing, like revolutionary goals or any kind of principles previous Egyptian constitutions stipulated or enshrined. So And on the other hand, it actually, the declaration as well gave the armed forces, the right to form a new constituent assembly if the existing one, you have like, administrative court ruling of the dissolution. So if the existing one, if the court ruling came into effect, or the existing one failed to write the new constitution, so the additional or the supplementary constitutional decree gave, the armed forces or the SCAF the right to form a new one. But actually the existing one, which was like, predominantly Islamic, it was like, or dominated by Islamic figures. It actually it managed to write the constitution that actually was ratified in December 2012, and it secured the privileges of the military forces or the armed forces by, like, giving the military forces maintained or kept had the right, to approve, to give like approval to the Minister of Defense, and they kept, kind of autonomy of their budget, away from any parliamentary oversight. Um, but like, so now, like, the Brotherhood thought that, they had, the electoral legitimacy, and now, they actually maintained or kept, the constitutional prerogatives and privileges needed, by the armed forces or the military, in order to neutralize, it politically. So the thought that they didn't need actually to reach out to non-Islamists in order to have, like, a consensus, or like to have, like, to have like real power sharing mechanisms, giving the electoral weight of the Brotherhood or the Islamists in relation to or comparing to non-Islamists. So they, like, in order to consolidate his authority, so Morsi, when he tried to give himself, like, extra judicial power in November 2012, so it gave himself, like, extra judicial power, and it also placed, his decisions above, any kind of judicial review, until like the Constituent Assembly writes a new constitution, and the elections of a new parliament, after the ratification of the new constitution. So this declaration actually triggered like, massive protest in front of the presidential palace, at Al-Ittihadiyya. It led to, like, severe and, like, deadly clashes between protesters, between Brotherhood supporters and non-Islamists. And this actually it intensified, the fears of non-Islamists, and it gave them, like, a sense that the country actually was on the brink of, like, a civil war. So the non-Islamist opposition, under the leadership of, like, three main figures, Hamdin Sabahi, like a nationalist, Nasrist figure, and Amr Musa, one of the, like, one of the main or prominent figure under Mubarak's regime, that actually occupied, high positions, and he had, like, solid base in Mubarak's regime. And al-Baradei, he was, like, framed, as the leader of pro-democracy movement. So they got together in order to establish or to form, this National Salvation Front, that actually it had only one thing: it's a common enemy, and this kind of animosity towards, the Brotherhood, but they didn't have any kind of common vision, or like, a common strategy or priorities, how to proceed, or how to enforce, or actually how to encourage, some sort of mechanisms of national dialogue in order to proceed with the constitution writing process, and to occupy, like, the opposition position. So it had like the National Salvation Front. It had like some sort of contradictory like statements and political stand. So the actually called on like supporters to boycott the constitutional referendum before they actually changed their like their minds in order to ask supporters to cast a no vote. And then for the parliamentary elections, they didn't share any sort of like a vision or a strategy if they would run if they would boycott the elections, or they would form kind of electoral coalition to to compete or to contest in the parliamentary elections. So they didn't have like still like it reflected this deep-seated division, even like between like the non-Islamist camp, and the like the lack or the absence of clear vision and a clear like a strategy and priorities. So the actually did one thing, like the while Morsi proceeded even after the Ittihadiyya Palace events. So he proceeded with the Constituent Assembly actually proceeded with the processes of writing the constitution. And there had been kind of calls for national dialogue, and it was like these calls were rejected by like non-brotherhood or non-Islamist. And they instead like resorted to the army, and they called on the army to intervene in order to impose mechanisms for national dialogue. So the actually the political dynamics here like pushed political players um, to reach out to like the like a political actor, or the army basically, as the main political arbitrator. And the final like showdown came with the creation or the emergence of Tamarrud. Uh, so actually it was like it's a rebellion movement. So it actually called for it had like a program, and called upon like the masses to sign petitions in order to overthrow Morsi, and accused him of hijacking the or betraying the revolutionary forces, and getting around the revolutionary demands. And they formed one front called 30th of June. It was like actually arranged kind of like protests and demonstrations on the same day, like 4 days before like the outbreak of the demonstrations, or like what they called like a second wave of the revolution. So on the 26th of June, so Morsi started to like to pay attention to what was going on, and he lashed out at his opponents in like the in an official speech. So he asserted his electoral legitimacy, and portrayed the opposition that actually arranged for these demonstrations, portrayed them and called them like disloyal opposition that tried to impose its will on the elected authority, in order to impose opinions, and to impose its own terms of national dialogue. And he hinted at their inability to participate through electoral channels. So that's why they needed to undermine the electoral channels that brought the Brotherhood to power, in a reference to the political and the electoral weight of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the military establishment as well, like on the started to deploy forces in like several governorates on the 26th of June. It gave like clear signals that these kind of forces like would protect the state institutions from any attack. And like in and it gave kind of a reference to the the protection or the duty of these forces in order to protect, peaceful demonstrations or demonstrators as well. So against, this backdrop, the backdrop of massive, demonstrations, El-Sisi actually declared the removal of Morsi on the 3rd of July, 2013. And the process culminated into a popular mandate on the 26th of July, when he called upon the people to demonstrate in order to give him a popular mandate to crack down on the Brotherhood, or to legitimize the war, his war, or the state's war on terrorism. And like millions, he did the call in order to give the state apparatus, in order to the mandate, or to give El-Sisi a mandate to crack down on the protest, to crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood and its supporters. And it actually, the process, as they had clear chants and slogans, to asking him to grind away, or to rein the Brotherhood in. And it actually it happened on the 14th of August, when the state and the police forces forcibly dispersed, the Brotherhood sit-ins in Rab'a and Al-Nahda, and it marked, the collapse. It was amid the a popular and or a wide context, of a popular approval and popular applauding as well of the state action. And it marked actually the collapse of the political process, or any kind of negotiation and compromise, any kind of political negotiations or political compromise. And it paved the way for the establishment of a new authoritarian regime that actually reappropriated the public space and disbanded any sort of demonstrations and political participation. In Tunisia, so actually the army as well played important role in the uprisings, when the army actually refused to fire on the protesters, and kept the police forces from brutally cracking down on the protesters. But actually, it didn't assume any political role after the departure of after Ben Ali actually fled the country. So, civilian government took over, and what's called Ben Ashur Commission. It had a kind of a mandate to restructure, or to uproot, the Ben Ali supporters from the existing, power centers, and to restructure the existing institutions, and to redraw, or to set, the new rules of the game. And that was they had a common target in order to fulfill the to meet, these kind of revolutionary demands, and to fulfill the revolutionary goals. So they agreed on the elections of the National Constituent Assembly, and they agreed on a proportional representation system, because for the representatives, in the commission itself, it reflected, this political weight of different political forces. So the agreement, when they agreed on this proportional representation system, it was kind of a reflection or a function of this balance of power between different oppositional forces, Islamist and non-Islamist, rather than it was not a cause that led to a cross-ideological coalition. So unlike Egypt, they have this mixed electoral system as well, and it actually it was the design actually was designated in order to diminish, or to actually to stop any kind of advancement, or the domineering position of Islamists, but actually it actually didn't. Because the power structure as well, and the balance of power, or the playing field in Egypt was heavily skewed in favor of Islamists to start with. But the playing field here in Tunisia was like, relatively balanced and level between different ideological forces. So like, the October elections of 2011 like gave like, clear manifestation of this balance of power between different forces. So the Nahda party, like Nahda, like the Brotherhood affiliated party, it gained 37% of the national vote, like, and then so it actually fell short of achieving or securing like absolute majority. So they like compelling, or obliging actually Nahda and the Nahda party in order to build this cross ideological coalition. And then the next six parties actually shared 100, like roughly 100 seats. So actually the coalition, the troika, or the coalition between Nahda and CPR, the Congress for the Republic, and the Takaful, the Democratic Forum for Labor and Liberties Party. So actually, and obviously it was like, Islamist and some secular forces. So they actually got together in order to form, this coalitional government. And it was actually it was not like, unlike, this conflict ridden legacy and history of the interaction between Islamist and non-Islamist in Egypt. They here, like the three parties actually they got together before in 2003. They met in Paris and they signed, this called from Tunis like agreement. So according to this agreement, these forces, like, they actually solved, any kind of contradiction between religion and democracy. And they agreed on like rejection and repudiation of violence. And they like in Nahda specifically like agreed to like the principles of civil citizenship and the civic nature or the civil nature of the state. And then they met again, and they reassured, their commitment to these principles in 2005 in what was called, or the 18th of October coalition for rights and freedom in Tunisia. So they actually when El Ghannouchi actually like returned to Tunisia after the uprisings. So he made a reference to the 18th October document in order to like to emphasize or to assert, Nahda commitment to the principles, to these principles, as a project of the entire society. So it was like, they focused mainly on political matters rather than like identity politics, and whether or not to apply, Sharia law. And just to be sure, like, it was not like, that easy, and the road, was not that smooth, because like, Salafis as well, they didn't go in line with the Nahda, and they asked for and they actually complained about, this secular orientation of the Nahda party. And they like, they intervened, in the political landscape by like using violence and committing, some political assassinations in February and July 2013. The assassination of some leftist figures actually polarized, the political landscape in Tunisia. And it was like, polarized into two main camps, the pro-troika and the pro-government camp, and then another bloc, that brought together, fierce oppositions. like the contested, or they disputed, the process of the constitution writing, and they started to question the prerogatives of the National Constituent Assembly, and some of the parliamentarians as well, suspended, in the participation, um, their participation, in the constitutional debates in protest against, these political assassinations. So it was like, again, like, fierce, like, the division or polarization between two blocks. But in this case, actually, the some civil society organizations emerged to arbitrate, or to have, like, to bridge the gap by holding a national dialogue and bringing, or all, like, the opposing or rivalry forces, together, to bring them to the negotiation table in order to reach, an agreement. So the quartet, or the national dialogue, quartet that composed of, like, the Tunisian trade union, and the Confederation of Industry, and then the Trade and Handcrafts Employers Union, and then the Tunisian Human Rights League, and the Tunisian Order of Lawyers. So they formed, the committee, and they agreed on 5 main points in order to bring an end, to this, like, stalemated, situation, or this kind of gridlock between the Troika government and the its oppositions. So they agreed on 5 main points regarding, the necessity to finalize the constitution, to enable, the National Constituent Assembly to write a new constitution, and to the agreement on, like, the establishment or the nomination of the Electoral Commission in order to supervise, or to like, to be like the superior independent authority for the next, or the subsequent elections, and the electoral law, and the, like, a deadline, to finish the constitution and to ratify it. And then they asked for, like, a resignation of the Nahda and the Nahda government. um, so they offered, like, a roadmap, and the Nahda party actually agreed to agreed on the roadmap, and agreed to hand over power to a technocratic government once the Constituent Assembly um, made decisions about like the constitution, and to finish, the constitution writing, and to, after the elections of the new electoral commission. And it did happen, actually, in October 2014. They peacefully handed over power, and that's why we saw, like, El Sipsi, when, like, Nida Tunis actually won the elections. And Ennahda had, like, one ministerial post, and they had, like, some parliamentary 60 and 68 seats, in the parliamentary elections. And they agreed together in Carthage declaration on the formation of the national unity government. So it marked, kind of, this peaceful transition, and peaceful alternation of power. Um, like a quick, like reference or comparison between from your readings here, you have, like you have two main explanations, and then some structure, one sort of, like, or one form of the, or, like, one side, of explanations is like a structural one, by focusing mainly on like pre-existing institutions, and mainly the military, and the size of the military, and the political the size, and then as a proxy for the political weight of the military, and then like the opposition, and the pattern of interactions between secular or Islamist and non-Islamist opposition. So here, like, this is from like one of the readings here, Brownlee and others. So you have here indicators, of the how central, the military is in Egypt and Tunisia. So the size of the armed forces, like here, it's roughly like double the size of the armed forces, like in Egypt. It actually bigger than the one in Tunisia. Actually, double the size, roughly double the size. Uh, and then like the military spending in millions of dollars. So here, like it's like a huge disparity between the military expenditure in the two countries. And then as a share of the GDP, there's no like a kind of a huge gap or wide gap between the two countries, and as like a military spending per capita as well. So here it was like but in terms of the size of the military, it was like uh, and giving like the size of the country as well, it's like remarkably larger than the one in Tunisia. And it was like it was like taken as like a proxy for the political way as well of the military. And then the opposition as well, like you have here like the Islamist, especially like the Islamist chair of the parliamentary seats in Egypt, like it was like roughly 70% or 71 here, or and in Tunisia it was like 41. So it was like like unbalanced power structure between like Islamist and non-Islamist in Egypt, contrary to the situation in Tunisia. Um, so it was actually like structurally speaking, it's okay, but if you think through this, it's kind of an interaction between the strategic choices the political players made at these at different critical junctures after the ousting of the long-standing dictators. These choices were essential as well, and how these kind of structural or pre-existing structural factors like affected decisions made by these actors. So in the Egyptian case, actually it pushed political actors to arbitrate to the military, that it actually had like veto authority in order to shape and to undermine the or to turn the entire process upside down. And the dynamics the dynamics actually pushed the different different political forces to adjudicate to the military, and to collude against the other political forces or the political actor, in this case the brotherhood. So you need like to think through if we need to focus or to investigate or to deeply or to lurk beneath these kind of structural elements, and we need to shift the focus a little bit towards the choices made, especially in this like at this like critical juncture. So it was a kind of interaction between agency and structure that would like account for or would offer a plausible explanation for different outcomes in the two countries. For Syria, um, so like protest in Syria caught everyone even more by surprise, even more than Tunisia and in Egypt. So they actually started out protesters they started out with demands for only political reforms and political opening, and they had like, this slogan in order um, to announce or to express their rejection of any kind of sectarian demands or sectarian like to structure this or to frame it in a sectarian language. So they actually made it they tried, to get the message across in the very beginning that it's not like, Sunni or Alawi, so it's more about, call for freedom as well. Uh, but like, from the very beginning, the Bashar al-Assad, or the regime actually didn't intend to make any kind of concessions, even like, offering a little bit of political opening. So that's why from the very beginning, the regime actually used shabiha, or like, the thugs, and of course, they were not in like in a police uniform, in order to uh, like to suppress protesters. And this like eventually, or like, led to like, the radicalization or militarization of the protesters as well. That, led to or legitimized, some sort of insurgency in the Syrian context. So the regime from the very beginning, even before like, even before Jaish al-Hurr or Jabhat al-Nusra, so the regime actually, the Bashar had his own like, master narrative, by portraying, the protesters as, it's not only like radical Islamist but Sunni Islamist. So he portrayed them as like, like narrowly like, sectarian individuals, and this would open the door to like, radical and Sunni Islamist extremism. So it had like, and the regime started to instill, fears of like, Sunni radicalism, and they started to distribute, like some weapons, and in some, Alawis, in some villages, that um, like, they have like, a huge number of, or large number of Alawis, in order to warn them or to protect them from attacks by Sunni. Um, so it was like, self-fulfilling, prophecy, because in starting from like, June and August 2012, it was like, the political landscape was totally divided and radicalized between different, militant groups, and different jihadist groups as well. So before getting to like, the June and August of 2012. So between, the outbreak of the uprisings or the protest, and this kind of radicalization of the political landscape, there had been some sort of um, like search for diplomatic, solution. So like, they had like, the intervention in Libya by NATO as an option. Like, some like Western power would intervene in order to get rid of, or to force Bashar actually to step down, or like, using the United Nations Security Council in order to issue resolutions to pressure Bashar al-Assad as well, to offer, some concessions, and to put an end to the escalation of the violence. So it was like, in January 2012, the Security Council tried, um, to bring, or to like, to offer, this kind of resolution, but like the Russia and China used the veto in order to prevent this from passing, um, to prevent the Security Council from issuing, any sort of resolution that would pressure Bashar. So Russia actually justified this on the grounds that any kind of external and military intervention, as it happened in Libya, it didn't actually bring about any form of regime change, but it triggered, more political chaos and political instability there. Um, so like, uh, so at this point, it was like, a failure of like Syrians and some the opposition's supporters as well, in the regional supporters as well, they started to give up on um, any sort of diplomatic solution, and they started to turn to force, instead of using, this diplomatic channels or institutional or international organizations in order to pressure Bashar. So they started to resort to force. Um, so like 1 month, after the failure of the Security Council to issue a resolution, so violence actually escalated, and the one of the neighborhoods of Homs actually got totally distracted and destroyed, and and that was like amid the active Security Council deliberation. So that was like this massive assault on the civilians, and this like massive like civilian casualties, um, like led to like a rupture point. And it was like clear for different oppositional forces that the regime actually, or the political situation, reached a point of no return. So that's why they resorted to violence, and they started to shift the debate about like arming the insurgency and rebels. And to it was like totally it was like the discourse shifted to justify or to legitimize, the militarization of the opposition, or to the militarization of the political of the political conflict, and to arm, the rebels and the opposition in Syria. And they started actually to debate about, how to um, or to debate about the rational use of these weapons, or of these uh, ways of militarization. Um, so by June, like June and August 2012, the political scene actually was divided between. So the political opposition actually didn't form like one coherent camp as well, but the political scene was even like severely divided between different political forces, that they lacked any sort of, again, like even in this kind of severe like political context, they didn't have any sort of common strategy or priorities and vision as well. uh, so you have like the local coordinations, the local coordination councils. So it actually emerged in June, and it was like a loose um, like organizational structure, or informal networks that actually offered some sort of civil resistance to the political, or to the Bashar regime. And it actually their main the main functions actually centered on offering some humanitarian aid and some sort of political representation. And they offered as well, like these councils offered the some information about the local conditions and the course of the battles in some localities. And the National Coordination Committee, and it was like formed in Damascus, inside Syria, because like there's a division between like in inside opposition and outside opposition in Syria as well. And it was like the committee actually posed kind of like a significant political challenge to the outside opposition, that actually represented by the Syrian National Council, as we are going to see. And the the opposition, the National Council actually was based in Paris. And the National Coordination Committee actually brought together some secular and leftist forces, in addition to the Kurdish parties. So they depicted themselves as like internal oppositions, and they had like different some like different orientation by adopting more gradualist approach or solution. So they accepted some sort of negotiation and settlement with Bashar al-Assad, and they didn't agree with the outside opposition over yeah, like some core strategic questions about these negotiations with the whether or not to go into kind of or to accept negotiations with the existing regime or Bashar al-Assad, and to as we're gonna see like the position and the status of the Free Syrian Army and the armed conflict. So the Free Syrian Army actually some military officers actually defected from the army, and they like some of the opposition actually throw their like lot behind the Free Syrian Army, because as it offered some sort of organizational and regular forces in order to attract more kind of defectors and more well-trained officers to bring them to the fight against Bashar al-Assad. So the National Coordination Committee actually disagreed on the armed struggle, so they didn't believe in this in the role of the Al Jaysh al Hur, or the Free Syrian Army, while the fourth organization, the Syrian National Council, actually it emerged or came into being in August, and it was like based abroad mainly, and from like Paris-based opposition. They actually played the important role in forming the council, and they managed to get some sort of international support from like and they tried they agreed on like some sort of regional and like some sort of intervention from like external power, and they tried to drag Washington into the intense situation in Syria in order to exert pressures on Bashar. So but they were actually deeply divided as well, the National Council, because not only because of like its own like composition and the like the complexity or the unawareness of the complexity of the internal and domestic situation in Syria, but because of the role of the regional power. Actually the role of like Saudi and Qatar and Turkey, they actually deeply shaped the agenda and the orientation of the oppositional forces. So like not to mention as I said, like the complexities of the internal debates or the internal situation inside Syria. So like this kind of like divided scene between different political players, and then the lack of the common strategy between like oppositional forces, the what added to this complexity, or to the complexity of the political situation, was like the regional support of insurgency and the militancy. So the regional supporters actually secured some sort of flow of the money, the funds, and the arms to their like to the rebels inside Syria, starting from like spring and summer of in 2012. And it was like firstly it was like through the Free Syrian Army, the Free Army, that actually positioned itself as like a viable organization to receive external military support. It was like in a position to fight Bashar al-Assad. So they were actually like it was like the Syria became like a battlefield and a target of like proxy war between different regional powers. So like when one party or one side escalated the situation and brought some sort of military action in favor of like one side, so like the other regional power that supported the other party responded in order to support the other side. So it was like, a battlefield for different, regional powers intervening and meddling, in order to support their like internal like groups or clients. Uh, so this actually actually complicated the situation, and it became very like very hard to reach a solution to offer to resolve, this kind of complex situation. Especially you have like, it took as well like, sectarian turn, because of like Saudi and Qatar and Turkey and to some extent Kuwait. They supported, Sunni insurgency, and Iran and Hezbollah like they supported like Shia insurgency. So you have like Islamist jihadist insurgency. Actually, they became like, represented. They were represented by like Jabhat al-Nusra, and then Ahrar al-Sham al-Islamiyya, and then later, the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. And they started Jabhat al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham actually even before, like, ISIS stretched, its territorial domain in 2014. So they gained kind of prominence in the war, and they overtook, the Free Syrian Army and the National Council. So they disappeared, some from the political scene, and it was like, cleared, to the jihadist, insurgency inside Syria. Um, so like the crisis actually had like, international dimension as well, because of the refugee crisis, like the exile of millions of Syrians that left Egypt, and because of this external actors, the intervention of the external actors as well. So as I mentioned, like proxy wars, and then like, these kind of arms and funds, by like, some patrons or regional supporters. And still, like, at this point, Al-Assad still enjoyed, this military advantage. And he had like, support from external powers, especially China and Russia, and like significant percentage as well of the Syrian population. So the regime, until, this point, it was like, it looked somehow like shaky, but it didn't seem to face any kind of imminent collapse. So this actually radicalized, the political and militarized, the oppositional forces, and led to, or fed into, the same like strategic, stalemate. Um, like regional players, and fluidity, of jihadist groups as well, made it very difficult to reach, a solution from 2012 through 2013. So I'll talk more about, these kind of like regional actors and sectarian discourse in Syria, and what accounts for, this brutal and prolonged civil war in Syria, and how like ISIS came into being and stretched its territorial and geographical domain in the region. And then we will talk more about, the uprisings, elsewhere in Libya and Yemen and Bahrain. And then we will conclude or end with the the idea whether or not, like would be Democrats or committed, Democrats, they do exist in the region, and like, how different countries, or like the countries that actually descended into this civil wars, they needed, double move, like to reach, an agreement or between like combatants, first, and then to have another move to establishing or to make like a regime transition. Okay, like so on Thursday we're gonna have a lecture, and you will have like a third one perhaps on Friday. Okay, bye.